Hello, I'm Richard Murphy, and I want to ask a simple question, which is, can we actually effectively tax multi-millionaires? Because this is the third in a series on that theme of the fact that we need to tax multi-millionaires more. Now, I've already addressed the question as to why. Now I want to think about the can we actually do it? Because it is commonly said that it is almost impossible to tax multimillionaires because if we try to do so, they'll run away, they'll put their wealth in tax havens, they will hide whatever they have from the tax inspector's view, they will run circles around any inquiry made, and they have very clever accountants and lawyers acting on their behalf. That means that they can never be caught. Well, is any of that true? The fact is that, well, some of it was. There's no doubt about it. For example, it was very easy for people to hide money in tax havens in the past because those places were quite rightly called secrecy jurisdictions, a term which I had quite a large role in promoting. They provided a veil of secrecy that meant that anyone using accounts in those places could hide their money there, and it would never be known about by any other country. So the declaration of that income or any other profit arising from the asset located in a tax haven was entirely down to the conscience of the multimillionaire. And we know from evidence provided by people like Gabriel Zuckman and others that, well, some of those multimillionaires don't seem to have much of a conscience when it comes to tax declaration. But, and this is the important point, the world has changed. I believe it has changed significantly, and that is why the timing of this series is so appropriate. It's changed because of the efforts of tax justice campaigners. Well, I was one of those, but I make no claim to be more than just one of many, who put forward ideas like country-by-country reporting, which has nailed down the large corporate world so that it must declare where it has its money and where it's making its profit. But more importantly, in the context of multimillionaires, there is now something called automatic information exchange from tax havens. What does automatic information exchange mean? Well, it means that the financial services provider in a tax haven must try to identify who the beneficial owner, i.e. the real warm-blooded living person who actually owns an account is. And they must then report the existence of that account through an automatic information exchange system operated via the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, back to the country where that warm-blooded person actually resides for tax purposes. In other words, it has become substantially more difficult for people to hide their money away from tax authorities. In most countries in the world, the OECD system applies. In the USA, something called FATCA, the Foreign Accounts Tax Compliance Act, applies, but the substance is the same. In effect, tax havens are no longer secret with regard to the money that is held. Now, I'm not saying that there are no games that are played. I'm sure games are played. I'm sure there are some financial service providers who are willing to try to bend the rules to not make disclosures, or are simply bribed not to pay disclosures, if I'm so blunt. But the fact is that a wise multimillionaire now knows that they can't run away from the tax system. They might physically want to move to a tax haven, but frankly, very few are sad enough to do that. Let's be clear, the evidence shows that the fact that we can name a few people who have run away is evidence of how few do. The reality is that very few are willing to break all their ties with their main country of origin and entirely leave to break their tax connection to avoid paying the taxes that they owe, simply because their children, their partners, their parents, all their friends are in that place of origin. So we are in a completely different world from the one that we were only in, well, in 2015. The world has changed so rapidly. And I thank the OECD for taking the initiative on this and for responding to the demands that the likes of I and others made that they do so. We are now able to track the world's wealth. Okay, I accept it's imperfect, but it is vastly better than it was. And perhaps the most important thing is that every multi-millionaire knows that there is a smoking gun out there, meaning that if they try to evade, they can be found out. What is the consequence? Well, it means that tax authorities have got the data to now track down those recalcitrant multimillionaires, and there probably aren't that many of them, who are really not paying their way. Evidence is that up to 80% of people who do have accounts in tax havens probably pay their taxes. That evidence comes from Denmark. Now, they're a tax compliant country. Call it 60 to 70% in other countries then. But the majority are probably now paying, and that figure will be rising as the awareness of automatic information exchange goes up. So all that we now need is something else to complete the equation. And that something else are sufficient tax inspectors to use that data to undertake the inquiries, to trace the money that is due by the wealthy, to ensure that taxes are really paid. We have under-resourced tax authorities around the world. Literally everywhere you look, there have been cuts to tax authorities, which have meant that there are insufficient tax inspectors to do the job of tracing the world's multimillionaires and collecting the tax that they owe. This is the biggest problem that we have in now collecting tax from the world's multimillionaires. I cannot stress it enough. We need to employ more highly qualified people to collect the tax that is due. And the evidence from the US in the past is that when they did apply people to this task, then each tax inspector could collect up to 40 times what they were paid in additional taxes when they targeted the extremely wealthy to ensure that they were paying the right amount of tax that was owing. In addition, we have seen a massive change in sentiment with regard to tax abuse. Government has put in place legislation in the UK so that it is very hard to sell tax avoidance schemes in this country now. Things that used to be common, film partnership schemes and so on, have all been subject to massive criticism and attack. Vast numbers of people have been made to repay the tax that they thought they had avoided. Artificiality has, by and large, disappeared from the sale of tax avoidance schemes. Quite simply, that's gone. So, where are we when it comes to abuse? Well, we're down to the abuse of the laws that are plain straightforward but which do not work, which should be applied if only there were people to tie up data from offshore and indeed from internal reporting within the UK, which is improving, albeit slowly, to the laws that are due, and if only we had the loopholes in those laws closed, we could collect the money that is owing by multi-millionaires now. I don't believe I could have made that claim 5 years ago. I'm not even sure I would have made that claim 3 years ago. But now in 2021, when I'm recording this, I believe that the time has come to say the groundwork, the data, and the legislation to enforce law is all in place. What is required now are the resources to make sure that law works so that multimillionaires can be required to pay. I'm optimistic. And that's why I'm making this series of videos on taxing multimillionaires, because this is the time to start doing it, to tackle the problems that exist within our societies that are created by the very existence of so much wealth in a society where so many are poor. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in what I've been saying in this video, please subscribe. There is a button below the viewing screen. If you're interested in what I have to say on Twitter, I'm at Richard J. Murphy on that medium. If you want to look at my blog, that's taxresearch.org.uk. And we have a Facebook page as well, Richard J. Murphy. So one of those things will get you more information on what this video series is about, and I hope I'll see you again soon.